So the title of this seminar is Aesthetic Precedes Ethics. What do I want to mean by that? That's might be the main point of the seminar. I will try to talk first about different concepts that I used to develop in my different works, and in particular in not a book, but a series of books that I ending calling the Chaos Project. And first, I will talk about what I call raw transcendence. Will allow us to understand what I mean by aesthetic further on. Second, what I call modernity. What is modernity? Third, the different cycle of the betrayal of modernity. And fourth, how to break the circle of negativity that actually resulted from the betrayal of modernity. And it is only at this last stage that I will talk a bit about beauty, about the experience of beauty as being somehow the solution of the entire problem. But we will have to define what is beauty to understand how it could be the solution of the problem. And I count on you, because you're so numerous, that I count on you to ask questions. And so we will refine, we will develop and expand within the discussion this concept of beauty. So first, the question about raw transcendence is directly related to the question of life. In fact, on two different levels. First, what is life? Second, what is human life? What is life? And I try to go very, to be very quick. So after you could discuss it, because I've written extensively on that, articles and all that, but just to show you what I mean. Life is desire. I will say life is even just desire, but that's already a lot. Because when we talk about desire, what do we talk about? We talk about positivity. Because what is positivity? Positivity is to go forward. So to go beyond yourself. It's what is positivity. Desire, you can't say, I desire, and not saying anything afterwards, even in English, in French, or any language. You know, you can say you're happy, or you can say you're satisfied. You can describe a certain state. But when you use the word desire, is desire towards something, someone, a name, or something. So that means that desire is attention. So what is life? Life is about desire, but it's about desire to survive first, like the desire to survive. And when you have forms of life, organisms that are a little bit more complex, it's the desire to survive better, what I will call comfort, or what I will call objective luxury. Luxury is when you can do without it, but in the same time, you can do without it, but you can measure what it adds. So it's the reason why I call it to survive better, that we can also call to live, the desire to live, not only the desire to survive, like it's comfort, for instance. So we have machines and things like that. But the first example of desire as a name, it's reproduction. So the desire to go beyond yourself is actually to reproduce yourself. You know? So, and to fight against the second principle of thermodynamics this way. So it's like if now we go to human beings. With human beings, it's like if human beings, they are, I will not say invented, because that's not the right word, but they live on a different layer, like creating a new kind of desire that I call the desire to be. But the desire to be is very simple. It's very simple. When you are talking to a little kid, you say, what do you want to be? And so you can see that the desire to be is right away the invention of time, because it's the desire to become someone. And so that's the narrative part, like the desire to be. Where does it come from? The desire to be, the desire to become. In fact, it comes from the ego. What is the ego? That will be another huge conference to talk. I have described that for people that wants to see what I mean by that. I give a little talk in Ben Guerrier. I think it was 2 years ago when there was this Science Week on complexity, where I said human beings are complex before they are complex, and actually, if they became more complex, it's first because they are complex, like frustrated beings. So they feel that they are not whole, that they are not complete. So out of this frustration, they created like a second self, something that they talked with. So it's called reflexivity or inner speech. And when they talk to each other, they will value these other themselves more than even their own organism. That's the reason why they're able to sacrifice themselves for the ego. So they're even able to put their life in jeopardy, not because they want to kill themselves, but in fact, because they want to be more. So sometimes when you want to be more, you need to kill yourself. That's called heroism. But anyway, if we carry on, we can say that for human beings, this desire to be these things of the ego is also related with the very fact that for human beings, their own life is a problem. So their own life is a problem. Etymologically, problema in Greek, that means obstacle. So their own life is an obstacle to express what they really want to be. And it's interesting because it's like if all the other beings, animals, they are in the desire to survive and to live, at first at least, they were even more efficient than human beings. But they were more efficient even to answer the obstacles, to overcome the obstacles, like evolutive problems or evolutive obstacles. But human beings, because this frustration and this ego and the invention of time, they actually created obstacles that don't exist yet because they anticipated. And that means that we could define, after having tried to define human beings as desire to be, so narrative beings that talk about themselves and to themselves more than they actually act directly. We could also define them as beings that create problems before they face them concretely. And it could be true for a simple couple that creates problems that don't exist, to the invention of mathematics, which is the very etymology of mathematics, because mathematics means, in Greek, a problem or something that you pose that is not yet here, a priori. That's what it means, mathema, a priori, before experience. So before you actually experience it, so before you actually face it. It's interesting because that means we invent problems that actually don't exist, that will allow us to solve problems that will exist better than the others that at first solved problems better than we did. So this way this way we can understand that what I call raw transcendence is actually the very awareness that there is something missing, something that can't be measured and that can't be understood in terms of usefulness even. And that's the first definition that we could give of raw, what I call raw transcendence, like the original feeling of transcendence, that something is missing in the picture, something can't be taken into account, it's unsatisfying. That's the reason why I'm creating problems that don't exist already, and I'm telling story, and I need to interpret what I can't actually grasp. That's called mythology, but I need to interpret it. So that's the reason why when some contemporary thinkers, or even like people from the 19th century onwards, say about religion or mythology, of all those kind of traditional discourses, narratives, that it is a lie, I say it's not a lie. It can't be described as a lie. It's a description as accurate as possible, but as possible. So it's a description that tends to make lives coherent according to what you see, seeing also that something is missing, and it has to be told that it is missing, right? So this missing part is actually the feeling, could become the feeling of the sublime. It's the feeling of, could be also the feeling of the horror of death, of life, of everything that we can't grasp. Therefore, it is inducing some kind of what we could call an original, natural. When I say natural, again, I use always etymology. Natural, that means natus, that right from the start, meaning when you were born, natus, naissance, right? When you were born, right from the start, is the original feeling of anguish. But we will see later on in this seminar that anguish is very different from anxiety. Anguish is not a negative feeling. Anguish is the original feeling that there is something that transcends our capacity to grasp things. So it's also the basic energy of the desire to be, of the fact that in a way we can be, we can die at the end of the world, or we can be saved, because everything is possible, because everything is not in the picture. So this feeling of anguish, we'll say, as remember what Lacan, the French psychoanalyst, said. It's a very interesting sentence that really influenced my work, is anguish is the only feeling that doesn't lie. That's the reason why the traditional man does not lie. I mean, I think the industrial man lies, and you will see what it means, but it doesn't lie. He does what he can, you know, to make things coherent inside the story. So, closer to what I call chaos. Why do I use the word chaos and not the Latin chaos that gave in French, or even in English, chaos? Why do I use the K-H-A-O-S? Because in our world, that became an industrialistic world, a negative world, chaos means something negative. That means privation of order, deprived of order, disorder. It's the chaos. But in Greek, that doesn't mean that. In Greek, that means empty. In Latin also, that means empty. But in our contemporary perception, something that is empty is missing something, is missing order. But for the traditional man, for the chaos point of view, is different. It means empty. It means empty because it's too full, because it's so full that you can't represent it, because it's overwhelming, because it always goes beyond what we can perceive and what we can grasp. It is the very power of creativity that can't be explained, at least that can't be understood from the outside. And being always inside can't be explained totally. And so the idea of chaos, empty, doesn't mean that something is lacking. That just means that you can't name it totally. And so the inside part of chaos, how this vision can be translated, could be transcribed into the being, it's actually another Greek word that has a bad reputation, but I think has to be rehabilitated, is the word hubris. Everybody says today that hubris is bad. But hubris is the very desire to concretely overcome the situation in which you seem to be in prison. So you are supposed to die, but you want to overcome the situation. You're supposed to be limited in your knowledge. You desire to overcome that. And so that's this original desire that comes from the awareness of chaos, of raw transcendence, that actually imply this hubristic dynamic. It's also, and it's interesting because this word gave birth to many words that exist today. For instance, when hybridation, it's the capacity to overcome your own prejudices, even your racial prejudices, to hybridate even sexually with someone that is very different from you, and to overcome, to go beyond what you are even biologically, what you are culturally. You know, there was some kind of spring feast that is called like Carnival in Greece. There was the name to call it was Hubristica, because it was a time where the girls will dress like boys, boys like girls, and people will drink. It comes from ébriété in French. That means it is not to be dependent on alcohol. It is the time when you use alcohol just on a certain level so you can overcome the convention, to be more creative. But if you go a little bit too much, of course, you become dependent. Nowadays, we interpret hubris negatively, and we even interpret the Greek mythology negatively, not understanding what the Greek wanted to mean. For instance, we interpret like Prometheus, the Prometheus myth, saying, oh, Prometheus, the myth of Prometheus that is supposed to stall fire, it's the idea that human beings has to prevent themselves from wanting to play gods, and they don't have to stall fire. I don't interpret it this way. I think, on the contrary, the Greek, they saw that this desire is the original desire that makes us human. But in the same time, if we don't control it at a certain level, we can, because it's the force, the very force of creation, it's also the very force of destruction. That's the reason why the god of hubris is Dionysus. But we need Dionysus. Without Dionysus, there is no transformation, there is no creativity, there is no going beyond, so there is no human beings. And the second myth is Icarus, Icar. The idea that he had wax wings. And people say, oh, he wanted to get closer to the sun, and so you don't have to get closer to the sun. No. The lesson is not to try to get closer to the sun. It's what human beings are about, getting closer to the sun. It is just that they didn't choose the right means to do so. So they have to be more careful in order to get closer to the sun, not with wax wings. So in fact, what the vision they have of hubris, the Greek, that could also be murder. It's somehow synonym of murder, synonym of many things, because it's the very energy that makes us overcome our obstacles, even moral obstacles. But in the same time, that's the source of all morality. That makes it ambiguous. You know, they actually sanctuarized hubris inside the Eleusis myths and all those sect cults and things they had. So it becomes for only people that were initiated, that were inside esoteric groups and things like that. So that means it is not that it is bad or good. It is that you have to try to control it. But in a way, it's more than that. It's so precious that you have to keep it in the sanctuary, this force, but not to destroy it, not to try to annihilate it, like what we tend to do now, saying we have to erase hubris. I think what is happening now in our industrial world, like with capitalism, for instance, is the opposite of hubris, because hubris is a qualitative, jump. But capitalism is the opposite, is the fact that you add quantities without surprise, that you want to secure things with quantities. You are richer, therefore you are preventing yourself from what could happen. You are insuring yourself all the time. But hubris is the opposite. You take the chance. And we less and less take the chance. So the problem of our society is not hubris. It's quite the opposite, actually. But the fact that we can't bear hubris anymore, that says a lot about what we have become. So now when we are thinking about religion, usually we think about religion as being the expression of transcendence. If you have understood me a little, you have understood also that religion is not a way to express transcendence. It's a way to limit it. And the limit of transcendence, it's called dogma, something that is reassuring. Because when you are into hubris, in direct contact with raw transcendence, you are a mystic. Those people that actually instituted religion are scared of, because they don't have any limit. And they tend to not take limit into account. But somehow they also need those people, because they are the witness of raw transcendence that is at the root of the very existence of the religion. So they tend to make those people saints, especially when they are dead and they can't anymore do any bad things inside the religious system. So that's what makes things ambiguous. So when transcendence is limited into dogma, it becomes something political, it's used to legitimize, it becomes refined transcendence. And I use this metaphor of raw transcendence and refined transcendence to show that transcendence is not a state like what is beyond, paradise or things like that. Transcendence is not opposed to immanence. It's another invention of the 19th century, this opposition, this binary opposition. Transcendence, of course, is immanent, because it's going beyond. From where? From here, And so transcendence is not a state. It's a process. It's not even a process. It's more than a process. It's a desire. It's actually the tension itself, transcendent, the very dynamic itself. But because it's raw, you can't do anything with it, because it's too big for us. It's too great. It's too powerful. So when you refine it, it's like when you refine oil. You can put it in your car and it can function, it can do something. That's the reason why when you have dogma became, right away, they became political. Because they are made for that. They are made to justify something, to give limits. But they are made to give limit from what is the very desire of human beings, raw transcendence. But they appeared refined, meaning with representations, with specific rituals, specific prescribed behaviors. And so it's when raw transcendence, being refined transcendence, became representations and became institutions and create a specific order that is necessary. We need order, right? It's when we reach a state of cosmos, if we want to talk like Greeks, that means certain kind of harmony, but an harmony that is destined to die and to change, because every organism, every organization, every state of the matter changes. But chaos does not change, because that's the very principle of change, because it's the principle that makes, that allows to go beyond, right? So now that we have defined this very heart of what are human beings and why we can't get rid of transcendence, it's just impossible. What happened, second point, in what we call modernity? I think it's the case of modernity is unique in the history of humanity, because it's, for many reasons that I've also worked on, what is the process from Christianity and the discoveries of other cultures, what happened, and it induced some kind of a doubt within the European society at a certain point, etc., etc. But what is important is here is the end result that we call, broadly speaking, modernity. Modernity is not the eradication of transcendence. On the contrary, we could say that it is the first time that collectively we have access to transcendence, raw transcendence, direct transcendence, collectively. And it's at that time that hubris, that is always there, was named directly without turning around it to say what it is, not using the word hubris itself, but to say that there is this force that is justified by itself inside all of us, that allows us to go beyond, that allows us to love, to go beyond even our own obvious interest, uncertainty and everything. And this is called subjectivity. And the entire system in the modern world is based on that. What we call, for instance, human right, the technical word, even in the legal apparatus, the legal grammar, to talk about human rights, it's actually subjective rights. Rights that are not determined, conditioned by your birth, the color of your skin, the fact that you're rich or you belong to a part of the population and you have certain rights and not others, just by the fact, the very fact that you are. Just because you are, you have those rights that are intrinsic to what? To your subjectivity. So, but that means that you need to trust. And you will see that it's not, the trust is directly related to taste, to feel. The reason why I will talk about beauty afterwards. But now I will just stay on this idea of trust. You need to trust that exists such a thing as subjectivity, meaning something transcendent all by itself in us that doesn't need to be scientifically grabbed, explained, that can't be grabbed and explained and can't even be touched in a way. That is the main, we'll say, the main bet of modernity that has a consequence. It's the development of the principle, the main now principle, collective principle. Subjective, it was individual principle. Liberty of freedom. What is freedom? What is liberty? Another word to call freedom will say undetermined. Freedom is just the fact that there is something not determined, if we say what is freedom. So if there is something non-determined, that means there is something that you can't grasp in the world itself. That's raw transcendence. And so you don't even put any representation. You say liberty. But what happens then? That will be my next point. Remember, I said that there is in this human being desire to be at the heart, at the core root of it, this very feeling of anguish in front of this void. But this feeling of anguish was in a way administrated by dogmas that limited the vision of the void in order to do something with it, to induce some kind of behaviors with it. But if you are directly connected, and if the void itself, raw transcendence, chaos, is directly unveiled in front of you collectively, what does it do? It could free you. But in fact, it's too big. It's too great, immense to be grabbed by us. We will still want to grab something. So it has provoked a massive feeling of vertigo. And in my opinion, this massive feeling of vertigo in front of the void created the desire to actually fill the void with something. Because if you don't accept the void, you don't accept the vertigo. The vertigo itself is the very energy of freedom, of liberty. It's the only thing that you can't name. The only thing that you don't represent in order to be able to represent anything around without risking to be repressed by the police or anything. Because in the name of the fact that things are always incomplete, you can't do all the science you want. You can't never reach what is transcendence. Therefore, everything is possible. Everything is allowed in such a society. But again, it's too big for us. And so with this vertigo has created such a situation. This anguish became unbearable. And became unbearable. Human beings, especially European, they were facing a situation in which they absolutely couldn't come back to the ancient world with tradition and all that, because they saw that there were so many representations that obviously they couldn't say Christianity is absolutely true or that is absolutely true, because they saw that there wasn't any absolute in front of them that they could accept totally. So they couldn't come back to the ancient world. But at the same time, the anguish of the void was so high that they couldn't accept the freedom that was offered. So they invented a new thing. It's industrialism that is directly rooted into nihilism. What is it? It's just a dogma, a new dogma. But instead of being a dogma that justify hubris, justify transcendence, it's a dogma that says there is nothing, whatever that means. That says things are not even things in a way. You will say matter is not even matter. And again, I'm coming back to etymology. Because matter, that means that has the same etymology that mater, that means mother, that means what is able to give birth. So what is able to go beyond itself, to reproduce itself. But they will have, that's the reason why I always say that I can be seen as a materialist, but I'm not an inertialist. So I don't think that the world is dead, that the world is just the adjunction, the mix, the combination of dead parts that at one moment, God knows why, will create something that we call an organism, but being made of dead parts is in a way already dead, even if it doesn't look as being dead. So there is a kind of desperation here that everything is already dead, meaning passive. That's pure negativity. That's pure negativity. But because you can't live in a world where there is nothing, but in the same time, you are unable to believe in anything whatsoever in front of this void, that will be the guarantee of your freedom. The only thing left, and it's when it gets worse, is to pretend that you believe in things that you can't actually believe in. And it's when we had this huge distortion that we are still living in with the principle of freedom, of democracy, of liberty, of subjectivity that became totally empty, just useful concept to carry on living in this world, knowing that we can't deeply believe in them, because that will mean that we believe that we trust transcendence. But because we're supposed to be realistic, in a way, we think that we need them functionally to function, because democracy will not mean anything if we didn't believe in that. But in the same time, we need to make them function. So it's what we could call like even the zombification of democracy that became only procedures. And it's when we are arriving at this third moment of the talk to say, how do we do to be able to live in a world with principles that we need to exhibit as much as possible, as much as we don't trust them. Just because we don't trust them, we need to exhibit them more and more and more and more. Liberty, freedom, humanity, and all these kind of things. And after it took many names, dignity. What is it? Dignity. The very people that talk about dignity, they don't believe that dignity exists, because in the same time they say they are pure materialist, in my vocabulary, inertialist, you know? They can't believe in dignity, because dignity will mean that there is something added to the sum of our organs. So how they will do it to qualify it? They will find desperately a way to qualify them. To qualify, they will say, it's suffering. Why will it be suffering? Like you lose your dignity when you suffer too much? I mean, 50 years ago, you lose your dignity when you don't suffer enough and you don't overcome suffering. So that means, doesn't mean anything. It's just changing all the time. Because we don't really believe in it. What we will say, okay, we want to help others. That will be the concept of pity. It will be pitiful. This pity will be pitiful. It's called humanitarian strategies and help people, but just to help them, because we don't know exactly what does that even mean. So to try to live in this world, there had been two cycles. Third moment of the talk. The first cycle, I call it the repressed strategy. And the second cycle, I call it the return of the repressed, like in psychoanalysis. The repressed strategy is the fact to how could we do to not see, to blind ourselves in front of this void, because we can't bear it. We can't bear that things are greater than what they said, because we don't accept it, right? This repressed cycle is also the cycle, what I call techniques for technique's sake, or technology for technology's sake. it's not only technology and techniques as specifically machines and tools and things like that. It's in fact the entire capitalistic aim at replacing greatness, great with big. The bigger it is, the better it is. Quantifying everything. Because it's bigger, it's better. And so it tends to make us forget about this void, because we feel it with money, we feel it with scientific results even, we feel it with the number of articles we have published in review that are even self-quantified, we feel it with everything that could impress us. And so we are building some kind of a fake transcendence. I will not enter into detail about this fake transcendence because that I call schizo-humanism. That is a way to create values when we actually don't believe in values. It's a process that I describe in details, not in the first volume of Chaos, but that is the main point of the second volume. I just mentioned it in the first volume, that I call qualitatization. Because many people say that the problem with modernity, with industrialism, what I call industrialism, is quantification. Everything is quantified. I said, no, everything has always been quantified. Like a fishmonger always needed to quantify the number of fish to exchange it with shoes because he needed to wear shoes and the other needed to eat fish or anything. So there was, you know, currencies and things like that, but there was always quantification. But the real change in our world, it's not quantification, it's qualitatization. Because it's in a world where we don't believe in quality, and quality is just what can't be quantified. So it's another word to talk about transcendence. What do you do? Because we still need to have meaning. So something that goes beyond quantification. We need to fabric. We need to make qualities. But we don't believe in quality. How do we do that? To do that, we need to impress ourselves with quantity. But like when you have an impression that is so strong that it allows you to forget about the origin of the impression. It's exactly the star system. What is the star system about? You are blinded by a star, and the star, once it is a star, you forget that it's only a quantitative expression of the number of people that have actually watched her that gives her the legitimacy. Or like a billionaire. What is important is not the number of billions, it's the fact that when you reach a stage when it becomes substantive, it's not an adjective anymore. You are a billionaire. It's like if there was a change of nature, you are in another level. And so it's like if you reached something else. And our society is full of this kind of quantitative threshold that makes us forget that it comes from a quantity in order to build false quality. Even what is called, I don't know how it is in English, but in French, la démarche qualité, qualitative label, when you want to put a label, quality control and these kind of things. It is just the fact that we believe so little in real quality that we make quality being just fact that it just goes through a specific process with people that put cross, and it's supposed to be a responsibility, something that induces responsibility, but in fact it's the opposite. It's the fact that once you have crossed, you are not responsible anymore. It's exactly the opposite that is actually happening. So you have all those processes everywhere that try to exercise the fact that we don't believe in quality anymore. It's what I call qualitatization. We will even have that in contemporary art, pretending like it's art for art, whatever that means. You know, that you don't believe in transcendence, therefore you will see that's the price itself that will determine the quality of the art. It's completely mad. It's pure speculation. And nobody cares about what it is, in fact. It looks like it's just subjective, so transcendence, because it's a signature. But at the end of the day, nobody cares about this subjectivity. The only thing that counts is it's becoming the currency itself, the art. So all those processes are the process in the industrial world that destroy the world also physically all around, but in a way that was kind of naive, this way to blind yourself about what you felt. But because it's also a process that repress your anguish, after a while, you felt dizzy, and even more like in an entertaining park. You feel that something is not right in what you are living. So you want to get out of the entertainment park. You feel nauseated by yourself, by the system, by politicians, because you know that politicians, of course, are faking because it's a fake world. So those politicians also are faking. But you know that they know that we know that they are faking, but they don't care. They do it anyway. So you despise them even more than you despise yourself, which is not little. So we are in a society where all these processes are just, becoming some kind of a loop, of a cynical loop everywhere. But in the same time, there is the return of the repressed. And it's at that time that there is this new cycle that is the identity for identity cycle, that people want to find refuge. It's something that looks like tradition, but that is not tradition because there is no transcendence at all, not even the dogma. So the only thing that is left is, I want to become a Catholic. I want, like my ancestors were. Of course, I don't believe in God, but it doesn't matter as long as I go to the church. Yeah, but I mean, the belief in God was the main point. No, we don't care. The important thing is just to be reassured with people that talk the same, that speak the same language. And if I have to pretend I believe in God, yes, why not? So again, it's another level of what I call in French semblance, like sameness. Sameness, another level of. And so this way to find refuge will be everywhere, even in the most unexpected part of society. It will be like regional, find I like refuge in the regional identity, or national identity, what is called populism, defending the people that are threatened by the world, by technology, da 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 da. But what is really perverse is just this identitarism will be seen and at least will be expressed as being like the medication against technology, for technology, against this cold global world and everything. Well, in fact, it is the extension and the final word of that, And so step by step will be regional, will be family, will be even human beings, and it will even be the earth itself. Even there is a certain kind of ecology that becomes today identitarist ecology, because it can't do better. But when you are identitarist, that's the most dangerous time. Why? Because when you are an identitarist, that means that you're scared. You're not. You can pretend you are in any tradition you are, but you can't. You don't even believe in your own tradition when you are an identitarist. I think that in France, people that are identitarists of the republics or laicity, they don't believe one word about laicity. So they make it a refugee. They are just inside it because they are scared about what is outside the rest of the world. But what is problematic? It is that you need to figure that there is a safe place that is inside. Everything that is outside is a problem. And step by step, you come to think that it is the problem, and so therefore you have to destroy it. And so even if you are an ecologist, you could say human beings are the part that are destroying nature. So therefore we have to destroy ourselves. We have to destroy human beings. We have to avoid all the traces of human beings. You can say everything, if we have this earth, everything that is outside is bad. We have to destroy what is outside, because there is always something that is the rest of us. When you have a transcendent way of thinking, of seeing things, even when you are in the tradition, you can be racist, you can be opposed to other people, but somehow you know that there is something beyond that that does not justify the horror. But when you are in the identitarist cycle, there is nothing to prevent you from justifying destruction and horror, because there is nothing beyond. The only thing you have to protect is yourself, whatever you call yourself, being a big group, a small group, the entire earth, or anything, because it's always exclusive. So it always works with exclusion because you have nothing else. So it's where I would like to come now. That maybe you have understood what I want to mean, what will mean this sentence that I hesitated to say just when I started, but now you might understood it better after the explanations. Like ethics is the very problem of a world that is becoming immoral. Why? Because ethics is a system of justification that works only intellectually, like an explanation, a constraint related to what you're unable to actually do. It's something that comes after, even without the trust in what will be necessary to trust in order to actually perform what you pretend you will perform. So ethics is the last way, that is a way to heal or prevent anxiety to come up. Because the more you inhibit or you try to blind yourself in front of the anguish that, again, is the very energy of hubris, etc., the more it comes back in the form of anxiety. And the more, when it becomes collective, you need to pretend it does not happen. Pretend you have principle. And ethics is the last word of that. But in fact, what is moral in morality? We distinguish moral and physical. When we say physical, we don't mean physis like the Greek would put it, like nature and all that, etc. We mean something that is purely not even material, if you heard me, something that is inert, something that is dead. But when you say moral, that means that is something that is inside, it's pure subjectivity. There is something that is not inert, that is not material, that you can't grasp, right? So if you don't believe in that, what can you do? You need to justify that you will still respect principle, that in a way there is no reason to respect if you don't believe in that. And it's called ethics. So we can see that in the very, you know, in the different layers of negativity, in particular related to ecology, because everybody's talking about ecology today. It's supposed to be vital, etc., etc., etc. There are three layers of negativity that are just coming from these new ethics, not even new ethics, you know, these immoral ethics, right? First layer is the descriptive layer. Everything is crumbling. Like the sea is getting up and we are all going to drown, and etc. It might be true. That's not the problem. The problem is that we are just describing things in those terms, right? Second, the solutions, negative also. We have to ungrow. We have to become smaller. We have to maybe disappear. You know? And it's what was told right from like the 50s with the ungrowth movement in economy and all that. I don't mean that we don't have to ungrow economically, but if we ungrow economically, we have to propose other way to grow. Otherwise, that doesn't work, because the basic need for human beings is to grow in multiple ways. It's not a question of money. It's something else. But because we don't know anything else than money and growing industrially, technologically, we say we have to ungrow on that aspect, but without proposing something else, because we're unable to propose something else. So what is left? Anxiety. Third layer, the worst one, the moral layer, saying, who is guilty of that? Man, the white man, the black man, the West man, the East man, the man from the South, from the North, maybe all men, maybe even life is guilty of that. Well, in fact, if you examine it very rationally, who cares about who is guilty? Because guilt is the opposite of responsibility. Guilt is a way to say, I feel guilt, and it's self-pity. And the only thing we're able to do now, self-pity all the time, pretending that we are able to understand what feels a wolf, even an iceberg. What does that even mean? Who cares about what feels? I mean, the problem with human beings is that they can't keep their own place. It's not to feel what feels a wolf. It's to understand what feels a human being. How to break that? We have to stop with the circle of justification. And what is the only thing that justifies itself all by itself? It's actually aesthetic. It's the aesthetic experience. The very definition of the aesthetic experience is the fact that it doesn't need any justification. And it is the basis of all ethics, or real ethics. Why? Because when I'm saying it's a specific experience, the experience of beauty, for instance, it's the experience of enjoyment. You enjoy something. And the enjoyment of all enjoyment is the capacity to leave yourself open in front of something that is obviously beyond your grasp. Of course, you can train a little bit in a lower level before having this kind of experience, right? You can just feel that if you go in a certain direction, it's painful. If you go in another direction, it's not painful. And so maybe it's an indication, right? So something is opening. But step by step, it becomes more like the aesthetic experience. If you don't do that, you need to complexify your ethics even more And your ethics become more and more coercive because nobody wants to follow it. And the proof of that is the ultimate absurdity to put ethics in the law. It has never happened like that in the whole history of humanity. Ethics is just morality is morality. Of course, a law is supposed to be moral. So when you call a law, it's a law about bioethics. What do you mean? You mean the other laws that are not ethics? Of course they are. But that just means we don't know what we are talking about. And we know that it's so unnatural that we have to force. But when you have to force ethics, it just doesn't do anything. It's just already condemned to not apply. That's actually the reason why we can't get out of the vicious circle. We can't change the direction ecologically. We can talk about it, but the more we talk about it, the less we are actually doing concrete things. Because to do something, you first need to feel it, to feel the experience of it. You could say, what is he going to say? What is concrete about that? Simple. Even the experience of the 70s, when people were living in what I call concrete utopia, they were, even all the critics you can make about it, at least those people, they invented sustainable development. They invented happy austerity because they were experiencing freedom. They put a little yoga here, dreaming about what was happening in the East, in the North, in the West. I think the modern experience with transcendence. And when they were living, when you were saying liberty to them, that meant something because it has some kind of a taste in the tip of their tongue. So they were attached to it. You didn't need to put it in a law, in a requirement to make it coercive, because that was a concrete utopia. And remember, that concrete means to grow together, to be able to overcome your prejudice, to taste the other, to taste even the happiness of the other that makes you even more happy. And so you are practicing transcendence, and you are feeling it like an aesthetic experience. After having done that, it doesn't mean that it's the end of the process. After having done that, yes, you can try to understand what was actually happening that gave you so much pleasure that you were living that. And so you can describe it, explain it, and it becomes ethics. But it comes afterwards because it has to grow inside the very feeling of enjoyment. Otherwise, it is just like when you forbid something to children, and we are all children, but you didn't allow them to taste, to enjoy what it could be if they actually respected these rules. You tell them technically that they have to do that, otherwise we will disappear. But human being, as I said right from the start, their survival, even their life, like desire to survive, desire to live, is less crucial than their desire to be. So if you forget that, their desire to be is directly related to their feeling, their joy of becoming greater than what they are. What we call a beautiful gesture. What is it? And it's really beautiful. A beautiful gesture is the heroic gesture. It's the fact that you do it without any cause and without having some kind of an income from it. So it becomes a beautiful gesture, like a perfect gesture. And you get some kind of a joy doing it. And it is what is a moral gesture. And after you can explain yourself and you build an ethics on that, that become a solid ethics. If we do it the other way around, we are just feeding the vicious circle of techniques for technique's sake and identity for identity's sake until everything is destroyed. But I mean, really everything, because when you have finished killing all the enemies, the circle becomes narrow and narrow and narrow, and after there's just you left. I think if the Nazis had survived, they would have killed themselves at the end, because there will be only them left. But I'm afraid that in the time of the Nazi, it's like if there was some kind of a bubble of identity for identity's sake that has focused technology on the one that were supposed to be responsible for the unhappiness, the negativity felt by the German people. But they were surrounded by people that were still in the cycle of technology for technology, with this kind of naive way of filling the gap of capitalism and all that. But the problem is that now, even if it looks better, I think it could become worse, because it's on a global scale that we are risking to fall into identity for identity scale. And if it is on a global scale, there is nothing and no one that surrounds us to prevent us from total destruction. And it's not with the identitarist ecology that we are going to be saved, but just by reconnecting ourselves with raw transcendence in the modern way, and to feed again our hubris, meaning with the beautiful gesture, the heroic gesture that will reinduce the desire to be. Thank you.
Let's start with questions in the room. Does the microphone work?
Yes, the microphone is supposed to work, right? I don't know where it is. It was out there.
So I hope everybody hears me also on Zoom. I'm speaking in the microphone. I suggest to start with questions asked in the room. Anybody here?
Yes, it's more of a side remark, but have you seen the movie Drunk? Because what you said about ebriety, that the Greek were drinking just to be just on this threshold of being more creative, being able. That's the theme of a movie which is called Drunk, and where people, dads, they experiment with drinking and they check what's the right dosage to be just different and good. So yeah, if you haven't seen it,
and you see, when we are talking about ebriety, it's also because hubris or raw transcendence as a whole, and is, even in antiquity, is hard to stand. And so these anguish could very easily be converted in anxiety. But with the fact that you drink a little, it's like if you can integrate it, and you can be in this kind of joy with people, being able to go beyond not only convention but beyond your own fear.
Yeah, you're opening
Yes.
your boundaries. Yes.
I first wanted to give an example of this abuse of ethics that I found myself in my work. I submitted a research proposal to the National Fund for Scientific Research here in Belgium. And it was a project about art science, about artists being inspired by scientific work. And the project said that we would interview some artists to ask them how they see their work. And one of the referees complained that I hadn't marked on the ethical document supporting the proposal that I was working with human subjects, and that there was the danger that those human subjects, that means the artists that we would interview, that the ethical values might be somehow overcome. So they were apparently afraid that maybe by interviewing these artists, we might make these artists say something that afterwards they would regret. Well, to me, it seems kind of obvious. An artist ask about their work, of course, they will want to speak about their work, and they would be adult enough that they would not say things that they wouldn't want to say to a researcher. But again, according to the rules, the regulations, it should have been marked in the ethical guidelines that this research was going to treat human subjects, and this human subject would probably have to sign all kind of forms to say that they agree to be interviewed about their art, etc.
Yeah, justification with papers, formulas, and everything, because you don't believe in it, you need to justify it with papers, administration, and all these kind of things. Yeah. And at the end, you feel disgust, which is the opposite of the taste of beauty, on which real ethics has to be grounded. Instead, you feel disgust. So how can you do something that actually disgusts you?
And then I wanted to generalize from that. I think that a lot of what you described is a process of what I would call formalization. Formalization is when you formulate something in such a way that it is no longer context dependent, which is what you do in mathematics for good reasons. You want to have general rules in mathematics that you can prove. But the problem is when you start formalizing things that can't be formalized. And in this case, this is an example. If I do an interview with an artist about the meaning of that artist's work, I can't formalize what kind of things I'm going to ask and what kind of things he's supposed to say and which kind of things he's not supposed to say. You want precisely that process to happen spontaneously, and depending on how the conversation is going, that artists may say certain things or not say certain things. The artist may be very enthusiastic, or the artist may be irritated, or whatever. You can't formalize a conversation.
You remember what we said at lunch? And I said the difference between progress and program. They want you to program your conversation. So it's not conversation anymore, because what you want is your conversation to progress. So you want even to discover something that you don't already know, and maybe something that the artist himself does not already know. That's what is a conversation about. But in our world, because we don't even believe in the power of subjectivity, which is expressed in the conversation, we want to secure it. And so we want to program it. And so it becomes just nothing at the end of the day. It's secure, but it becomes nothing.
And I want to tie that in with the concept of role transcendence, because I have also a theory about transcendence, what I call transcending the rational symbol system. And a rational symbol system is any kind of a language or theory or representation which has well-defined symbols that have a well-defined meaning and well-defined rules that say how you can combine the different symbols. So formalization means that you try to make these symbols as precise as possible, as unambiguous as possible, which is what you do in mathematics, which is what you do to some degree in science, but which is something which is not in general possible. In normal life, there are constantly new situations that do not fit into fixed categories, that do not fit into fixed rules. So if you try to capture something in a representation that I call rational symbol system, you are indeed throwing away part of it. You're cutting off part of it. And what I called then the transcendence was that you would go beyond those symbol systems, those distinction systems that cut up reality into a number of categories, and create a way to speak about it that is not limited to those rational symbols. Now, of course, it's not obvious how you do that, but that was a little bit my definition of transcendence, and I think it also fits in with your definition of world transcendence, of not formalizing, not programming, not putting things into fixed categories or fixed rules.
But I think maybe, again, here, there might be a little misconception when we mix the word formalization, formal sign, for instance, and a symbol. Because a symbol is not even an analogy. I know many people think a symbol is an analogy. If you, again, look at the etymology, I don't always do that, but it's interesting to guide us into the meaning. A symbol is not something that is supposed to reduce anything. On the contrary, a symbol is the awareness that something is broken because it means that. It means that part of a pot is broken. And so because it's broken, you have a part that is left, that is here, that you see. And this part, because it's broken, there is a part that is not here anymore, that you can't see. But the very shape that is here shows what could be missing. So it's all about the idea that there is always something missing, and that the symbol is just here to induce this idea that there is something that is missing, and we leave it open because we can't say more. So that's the reason why I say it's not an analogy, and it's not a formalization on a reductionist point of view, if we think about a symbol this way. But I know in mathematics, what we call a symbol is actually not a symbol.
I'm using symbol in the way that it was defined by Newell and Simon in the attempt to define artificial intelligence. They spoke about a physical symbol system, where a symbol is something with a well-defined meaning.
Exactly.
And yes, indeed.
In fact, the symbol specifically, is just the fact that you can't actually define, so you call it a symbol. But I know it became something else. I know
but the interesting thing is that by defining it in that way, there was immediately the criticism from Stefan Hernat, which he called the symbol grounding problem. And what Hernat said precisely is, you have a symbol, you need to ground it in the real world, and there is nothing in your formalism that tells you how to ground it in the real world, because the formalism can only speak about the symbols that are already in the system. It cannot speak about whatever is outside of the symbol.
At the moment, we are doing some kind of a long dialogue with Gregory Shaitin, the mathematician, in the Institute for Advanced Studies in Bulgaria. And I was telling him inside the conversation that from Cantor onward, people said, usually, even mathematicians, that mathematics is becoming more and more abstract. While it was more concrete before, when it was dealing with finite numbers, with finite series of numbers, etc. But when it was dealing more and more with the infinite, it was becoming more abstract. And I said, I think it's exactly the other way around. Because when mathematics is just dealing with symbols that are supposed to represent precisely what they are, they never fit into reality. Into reality as real. They fit just into calculations. So they fit more or less like to calculate, to say, for instance, 1 apple plus 1 apple equal 2 apples. Yes, but there is no such a thing like the same apple. There is just a category, and the category is totally abstract. But when we get into the new conceptions that we have from Cantor and others of the infinite, in fact, we see that we are entering in a world where this idea of continuity, the mystery of continuity, all these kind of problems that seems difficult to overcome somehow with strange numbers and all that. I think at that time, we are step by step entering into some kind of a mathematics that is closer to reality. And that's the reason why he can't actually grasp it with too precise symbols. Because when we are talking about infinity, infinity is like everywhere concretely. For instance, when we say, what is to touch someone? If we touch someone, that means that we are on it. But in the same time, we need to be at a distance. But if we are at a distance, we don't touch someone. Because if we are not at a distance, that means that we are confused with this someone. But we are not confused with this someone, we are still different. If we are still different, that means that even if I get closer, saying that I get closer, that means that there is a distance. So that means there is a continuity and a distinction in the same times. What does that even mean? And so, you know, I think the more mathematics seems to be abstract nowadays, the more it gets closer to reality. The same thing with quantum physics for me. It's the less abstract physics is actually quantum physics.
Any other questions here?
Yes, maybe some comments about the concept of identitarist. I think a lot of it could be developed, or maybe you already developed it with the notions of in-groups and out-groups, which are very deeply ingrained in our evolutionary psychology, from an evolutionary psychology point of view. And so if I get one of your core messages to learn to see the old group, not as something that is to be destroyed, but as something that has potential, that needs to be also preserved and respected somehow.
It's not exactly that, if I can allow myself, because it is something, it is not only because it's not something, it's something that you have to avoid to substantialize. Even if it is to see like, oh, they are so great, they are so better than I am. It's not that they are better, or it's not that they are worse. It's just that you can go beyond them, beyond yourself to go through them. That's very different. For instance, when you love someone, let's take it it's not that you think that this someone is better or worse than you, because pure admiration is also the substantialization of the other. And it prevents you from being really in the dynamic of transcendence that allowed you to love someone, to, to go beyond, to always go beyond even the very idea that you have, even if it is an eye of the other, even if the idea is like something totally, marvelous, as long as it is a substance. Because the idea of transcendence, it's the idea of the very substance of the world is actually, in a way, we say the word, the mind. So if it is the mind, that just means that you always need to transcend the idea you have of your own substantiality opposed to the substantiality of the others. Because I think even admiration, when you substantialize the thing, is also an exclusion. Just the little.
There's a question on the Zoom.
And hello, everyone. Thank you very much, Raphaël, for this interesting conversation and seminar. So I was thinking about you mentioned about the case in Europe where they couldn't come back to find the ancient world, and therefore they kind of fall into this hands of industrialism. And with that cycle or that movement, they kind of fall into this idea of inertialism, meaning that the world is made of dead parts. So I was thinking towards the end of your seminar, you mentioned about the second cycle of identity for identity. I was thinking, actually, if we mix identity with identity cycle with inertialism, if we put them together, we can see that actually another trend is emerging, meaning that it is giving the world an impression of coming out of inertialism. I was thinking, actually, it makes inertialism as some sort of animation of the world. Instead of moving it toward the raw and alive, it actually sells the idea of now we're getting out of this fake transcendence by, for example, diffusing the subjectivity of experience of people into I am vegan, I am brown, I am vegetarian, I'm binary, non-binary, all of these kind of categories that are coming out of identity for identity. I was thinking it's actually another kind of way to stop this cycle of inertialism to really be broken out and lead us to experience the true subjectivity of being in a world that is alive and is beautiful. So I think a lot of people, going back to this idea of aesthetics precedes ethics, is that in fact, by diffusing their subjectivity, I think they have this impression of they're actually caring about the world. As we have many long discussions, for example, at CLEA, for example, I don't want to point to certain people, but we have seen this kind of like persistent kind of trend that if you're not really as Greta Thunberg of movement of like ecology and all this collapse of ecology and ecosystem, she said very clearly in the World Economic Forum, I want you to feel about climate change as if your house is on fire. So in that feeling, that then became the dominant feeling that many people think if you don't feel that specific feeling, actually you're ignorant. And this is what the immediate label that stops the conversation and stops actually those people who seemingly care about ecology, ecosystem, planet, or whatnot, to diffuse their subjectivity into different layers of identity and feel they are actually growing. They're feeling this hubris effect, but they're not actually. So I wanted to just say that I was thinking that this, if you put these cycles next to a matrix of identity for identity, working with inertialism, then technology for technology, acting on inertialism, then the impacts are so, I think, tremendously destructive that really, I think, call us on this really thinking about what kind of world we really desire. What do we want? What we desire as beings? The desire, that desire space you're talking about, really going in the space of desire rather than subjectifying the space of desire in correlation with the subjectivity that we are missing actually to experience. There are two things: the subjectivity that we are missing to experience and we are craving to experience, at the same time, the desire to be.
Wow. It's well, I could just say very shortly and try to be kind of simple. It's just both cycles, they find substitute to subjectivity. They look for substitute for subjectivity. In the first cycle, the substitute for subjectivity will be like the efficiency itself, or the accumulation, or the consumption. There are different sub-cycles that I haven't talked about, what I call the phases, but I'm not going to, I want to describe that. There is the entertainment phase also at the very end of the first cycle. But the substitute for subjectivity in the identitarianism cycle is actually identity. It's identity itself. So you pretend that it's your subjectivity, but because your subjectivity is just this void that allows you to not represent anything but just being free, you can't bear that. So you want to refuge yourself into a definition that is a finite definition of yourself that you call Belgium or French or being from such family or being that or there or woman or man or anything for that matter. That's the reason why I always say, for instance, in this wokeism debate that I think is again a fake debate as usual in our society, where people are for, the people are against. I said, for me, I don't have any problem with a transsexual, with an homosexual, with anything sexual, gender, or anything, as long as the one that is in front of the heterosexual or these or whatever is not fixating himself into a certain identity that will be superior, excluding, or anything else. Because if I am, I will say, for transsexual, it's because I'm for transcendence. So I'm for, if I accept all identities, it's just because I consider that an identity is just an identity. It's because it's just an identity. There is no identity that is more superior or can impose itself to another identity. But because I believe in subjectivity, I believe that subjectivity is the very nature of things and of what we are, of things like in raw transcendence, what we are as a being, right? I'm even ready to say, I don't care what was determined even biologically. If someone today decide that he wants to be a girl while he was born a boy, I don't care, because what counts is subjectivity. And at the end of the day, if this subjectivity allows him to goes beyond what was supposed to be imposed by nature or by anything for that matters, it doesn't matter. So it's in the name of transcendence that I'm adogmatic. I mean, on any dogmatism, it could be like a dogmatic that is justified religiously, for instance, Islamism. But in the same times, I am to allow women and girls to wear what they want to wear if it is a way to define themselves. If they want to wear a scarf or anything, you know? So I apply that everywhere. It's just in the name of transcendence that I'm able to tolerate all the identities. It's when the identity fixates itself to exclude others that it's becoming a problem, because that means it's a lack of transcendence. When we think, for instance, that it is in the name of transcendence that we had war and things, and etc., there is nothing more false than that. Because when you are into this connection with raw transcendence, you can't allow yourself to exclude the other, because that will mean that you know completely what is the other, but you don't know because you know that there is something that is not in the picture that you can't judge. Therefore, you can't even decide if the other will leave, not leave, or doing that or not doing that. So the only thing that is left is to overcome your own prejudice, to, hybridate, to grow together, to try to do something with it concretely. Yeah.
I'm a little confused with this talking of the other. And earlier when you were talking about the descriptive layer and the solutions layer, there was also this like moment of talking about like destruction, or mentioning like the degrowth movement. And so how is, they're also surely like living their own desire, right? They're also living their own desire for transcendence, or to see the world transcend. So where I don't understand where this kind of like this like hint of like intolerance to this other comes in.
But the intolerance to the other comes in when you're not sure about yourself. It's that when you're not sure about your own subjectivity. Because what comes into the picture is the frustration to not be recognized yourself, do not even recognize yourself, you know? And so the frustration will reach such a point where you will feel like Nietzsche was criticizing when he was talking about bad faith. So you are going to enter into a process where you feel constrained and you can't bear, for instance, that the other will be more free than what you are. Right? But if you are free yourself and you are able to face your own freedom, it's not only that you don't care that the other is free, it's that actually the fact that you interact with the freedom of the other will even be a taste of your own freedom, will allow you to taste your own freedom. It's actually the bet of modernity. The real bet of modernity is that. It is that. It is, and it's strange that, I mean, it's not strange because it hasn't completely disappeared, because it's still the aspiration that you can feel inside the population today. But this aspiration is, I would say, re-industrialized right away. You know, it's just like there is this aspiration, for instance, to become yourself, and all these words that could be empty, but are not empty. They are less empty than the word democracy and liberty today. When people say they practice yoga to become themselves, etc., etc., because it is transcribed into a real behavior and a real kind of enjoyment. So it could be the base for real new ethics. But what does it do? Because it's so deep inside us and it's such a strong energy, that is becoming the energy of something that will allow companies to earn even more money. And how can we get out of that? That's really the point, actually. You know, how can we do that? Because there is this thing when there is this aspiration, and we see that, we have seen that even in the 30s. There was those community movements. There was, you know, anthroposophy in Germany. People are laughing about it. They say it's a cult, etc. But there is the aspiration. I don't care what it is happening afterwards. There is the promise, the aspiration. And in the 70s, that was the same. But what do we have to propose? Like, you need to ungrow. I agree in a way to ungrow economically, but you can't say that just ungrow people. Well, in fact, you need to offer some kind of an enjoyment to become greater in another way. It's what they did in the 70s.
No, thanks for this. Thanks for this clarification. And I love this emphasis that you're putting on enjoyment and pleasure. And indeed, I think we've been having a lot of talks about this at CLEA too, about the importance of pleasure and embodiment in engaging with the world and understanding the world. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, also there's also there's very different, for example, to take this example of the climate movement, there's very different approaches to it, right? And there's also, in the degrowth movement also, there's also this people who very much, like, for example, there's Circa, this like clandestine insurgent rebel clown army. And so they dress up as, they go to protest, but they dress up as clowns. And so it's like it's an incredibly enjoyable thing that they do, right? Like it's like selling this, selling is the wrong word, but like producing this vision of the world, which is like a collectively enjoyable world. So even the rebellion is a joyous thing to be a part of, rather than a kind of, you know, a sad thing. So we do a lot of, one of the things we're researching here a lot is about the notion of play as a kind of collective phenomenon. And this is also, in some sense, I think, deeply connected to this. Like, how can we find an ethics and a philosophy and, for example, understand complex systems, firstly in a transjective way, but also in a way that encourages community and encourages joy through the process of getting there, right? Through the process of doing it. So yeah, I just think my one comment is that it's of course, this joy needs to be like extended, right? So like we have to be very careful, I think, that we don't sound like we're pointing the finger at people who are in a less favorable position than them to currently enjoy the circumstances of their own desire.
But you know, I think we have to come back to very simple things at first to grow on it. I think it's not a question of how can we motivate. We need to stop motivation, like it looks like, you know, these management idea that you need to motivate the troop to people to work, and etc., etc. No, it's just that, you know, when you look at yourself in the mirror and you say, oh, I'm beautiful and I'm well dressed and I feel elegant. The feeling of being elegant is raw transcendence, because I'm not only my organs. When my gowns or when my suits is, I feel something, you know what I mean? I'm a little bit straighter. I feel something and I feel good. In fact, I will say I feel the beauty of being dressed like that. And after, my body will behave even in a different way because I'm dressed in this way. You know, I will have this little smile and I see someone also that is elegant in whichever way it is. And these will really induce action. This is really action. It's not like I motivate someone out of nothing. No, the beauty of it, because the beauty is the only thing we have. I didn't develop it completely, but when we say when I say the desire to be, we don't know what is to be because we can't grasp it. Therefore, we only think that we know. It's the fact that we can look like what we desire to be. Le paraître emporte l'être, we say in French. So that means we have the pleasure of playing the role of our life. And we are into a beautiful scenario in which it's desirable to become what we are actually becoming in the action. It's way beyond motivation in the industrialistic way. If you do that, you really desire to do it because you distinguish yourself in your own eyes. So you start to exist as a human being. But we stop to exist as human beings the way we behave now. And so it's out of desperation that everybody tries to distinguish himself nowadays. But I mean, out of desperation, because you can see that people don't even believe that they succeed in doing that. Sometimes they say, okay, I will go to a community and try to live this way, etc., etc., etc. But after a while, again, the experience will be broken from the outside with the system itself that will enrich itself, that will make it something productive. But if we will, how can we do it to save the entire thing? Every time there is the expression of this kind of collective desire and people live them out of this enjoyment, it's at that time that we have to expand it instead of repressing it or using it. And if we do that, we are going to live democracy, because democracy is a mystical experience or it is nothing. And today, it's not much. I'm not saying it's nothing. I'm saying it's becoming more and more, I would say, not much.
Can I ask something?
Of course.
Thank you for the contribution. There are many questions it raises. A very simple one, it's nearly time, I think, is how do you compare your vision with that of Firsig? You remember Firsig, The Art of the Motorcycle Maintenance. He was talking about the notion of dynamic quality.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any relation, or is it?
No, I read it. Yeah. The art, because it's Zen and just I'm very. I've done my dissertation of the Westernized Buddhism, So yeah, I'm interested in these kind of things. Okay, do you want me to answer, or you have done what you want, or do you want to extend your question, or can I answer? Tell me.
I could extend it, but given the time, I think just a short answer. Do you see a clear relationship? Obviously, you did something in that direction with your thesis. So I just would like to get your answer to the simple question without the discussion that I would like.
So the simple answer is, for me, Westernized Buddhism as a whole is the attempt to live modernity right at the heart of raw transcendence. And the name of this attempt, the technical name of this attempt, is actually meditation. So you could say Zen or anything else. And from that, you can see that in every domain, people try to practice this thing that is this direct relation to the void, to make it something that makes you free without representing it, which is actually the very definition of meditation according to Buddhists, because it's the void, it's emptiness, but not emptiness with nothing, because it's also enlightenment, it's full of light, so of all the possibilities. But the problem is now, if I have to criticize what is actually happening, it's people will talk about how do you say this movement that we called full awareness, like you become mindfulness, which is really weird, because on one side we know that it's actually to empty yourself from all possible representation to be free. But even this aspiration, because mindfulness, like to feel the trunk of your conscience, of your awareness, like to make your awareness the very energy that will be used by capitalism, saying like, really, if you practice mindfulness, you'll be such a more efficient worker. You'll be so more happy. Even happiness becomes something that you can be filled with. So everything, you have the aspiration, and right away, even at the heart of it, which is the strategical thing with meditation, is right away retaken. Of course, because it's the most precious things. It's the energy that is the strongest in human beings, especially now. It's the thing that you can manipulate the more and that can give you more money, the thing that people will be ready to pay more. So how can we break this vicious cycle? I don't know. But of course, that's the same thing. That's the reason why I say there is this aspiration that it still exists when people read spirituality books and book of alchemy, sometimes very naive and everything. At first in my career, I was mocking that, like 30 years ago. But now I'm not mocking it, because that's the very aspiration. It's even my aspiration.
One of the things that you are saying is, in fact, that there is a vision of extending, escaping, transcending, and that there might be ways of doing it. And if I hear you correctly, what you are saying is that while the enjoyment is there, the enjoyment of getting there very often fails. Is that correct?
It is the enjoyment is the key, but the enjoyment is fragile because you're scared about your own enjoyment, because the enjoyment supposed to let it go. I will say, okay, to make some kind of an analogy, it's like the sexual orgasm. The sexual orgasm supposed to let it go if you want to enjoy. So that's supposed some kind of an abandonment, to give up something. And when you give up something out of this generosity, there is this generosity is its own income. the enjoyment itself that allows you to grow. But when you want to grasp, it becomes some kind of a perversity that makes you feel that you grasp something. We will say that capitalism in this way is pornographic because it wants to grasp everything. And when it grasps everything, it thinks it will enjoy more by grasping it, but in fact, it's feeling the hole that it feels in its heart even more, even more, even more, even more. And so it becomes more and more violent because that.
So transcending the transcendence is dangerous.
Oh, I mean, I don't think, I will not say that. I will say, when you are in this process of transcendence, when you stop it, you already feel the frustration of having stopped it and the guilt to not having been able to carry on.
Okay, more for discussion, I think. Thank you.
Are there more questions online?
Yeah, can I ask a question?
Of course.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for the lecture, though I joined late. I have a question on evolution of aesthetics. Do you think aesthetics have evolved over a period of time of human evolution from Stone Age man to the modern man? And does this evolution of aesthetics impact the direction in which the humankind is moving?
Didn't really get. Could you? Somebody got it in the room? I don't know. I didn't really grasp.
Can you repeat, Friso?
Okay, I'll repeat it. Do you think the idea of aesthetics has evolved, or is it a core value which remains same throughout ages? And does it impact the way human civilizations evolve?
No, I think there is, of course, the different appreciation of what is beautiful, not beautiful, is dependent on culture and dependent on a certain stage of history. But the very experience, the heart, the basis of the aesthetic experience is actually the fact that there is something that escapes our representation. So, for instance, even in a painting that is supposed to be a beautiful painting, you know, there is something that is in the painting, in the painting, like the perspective. There is a perspective behind the perspective. There is an origin behind the origin. So there is always something that goes beyond, that is ungraspable. And what makes a great painting, the aesthetic experience, is actually the very fact that you can't define the experience itself. And the first experience that you have will be, for instance, you see the origin, you see the sunshine in the morning, something is happening, you don't really know what is happening. It could be explained in terms of conditions and everything, etc. But beyond that, it gives you the intuition that everything that looks around is not limited to what I seem to perceive in its limitation. And it's when I accept that I feel, as Francis will put it, a no. And it is that is the very, I will say, the that is the start of the feeling of transcendence, in which you can make something grow, because it's just this little thing that is little that you can grow, and when you grow it, it can become an entire society. It can become the feeling of fraternity. It can become the fact that you share that in a certain way with poetry, etc., etc. It can become science, in fact. It can become science. I think the real power of science, it's related with poetry. Because poetry, sorry about the etymology, it comes from poiein. That means producing more than yourself, to go beyond yourself. And it's exactly that. It's exactly that. You know? When science is reducing itself into some kind of a multiple procedures, engineering, and things like that, it's actually betraying itself. Even mathematicians, they say when they like a demonstration, when they like something logical, they say, oh, it's elegant. There is something simple, elegant, that goes even beyond what they can demonstrate. But they know it's true. That's this feeling too. So I think this is universal. Doesn't depend on the time or anything, or culture, or whatever.
Thank you. I'll think more on this. Thank you.
I have one question. Thank you for the talk, Raphaël. Two things, actually. In order to get where you would, I suppose, I hope you would like us all to be, to go through that process and reach that raw transcendence. And so, in my mind, there are two things, very practical things, correct me if I'm wrong, that can be done in order to do that. One, on a personal level, what do you think of the idea of volunteering, like doing charity work? I don't like the word charity, but let's say when a person volunteers and does things because of that. And on the level of society, the basic income. Do you think that those two things practically could possibly bring about?
Okay, there are two questions. One is the last one that I've answered extensively in a book that is called Sans Emploi, where I actually ask for the basic income, and not only that, but for the abolition of the tax income, but to put the tax only on the capital, and also but there is an entire change in the system. But these, even if it goes in the right way, it's not enough at all. Now you talk about engagement. It depends. If it is an engagement that I intend to have out of the justification because I've read Habermas, or because I think it's better, but because I justify the fact that it gives some meaning, blah, 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 I say no. Really, I say no. But if this engagement makes you fantasize about an adventure, about the discovery of other culture, about going on the other side of the world, that it will give you something about, I don't know, ancient civilizations, and you will love those people that you will help yourself in helping others. If it doesn't work like that, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. It works only if you have the enjoyment of being helped by the one that you actually help. We could call that like practical hybridation. We have tried that many times, like to engage because we have to. It doesn't work. We become condescendent. We don't really love the people we are actually helping. And at the end, we even feel bad to have been so generous. And we say, what do they do with all the wealth we have actually given them? You know? So we have to prevent this kind of process to happen. It has to become an adventure. Like when we talk about an adventure, like a love adventure, say, une aventure, it has to become a love adventure. Because it's the only thing that makes my heart beat. And as long as my heart does not beat anymore, like I don't feel this and being active, everything else is just chatting around in the air, justifying, reading Habermas, who I think does not even believe in what he writes. What have I said? Sorry about that.
Shima, do you have a question?
No, it's not a question. Actually, I wanted to make a comment about this question of personal level volunteering. Actually, I really agree with what you said, Raphaël, and I wanted to also point out to this kind of movement of effective altruism that was coming out of this idea of basically volunteering and kind of putting yourself in this state of like a fake state of actually transcendence. That I think the classical hallmark of example of that can be seen in blockchain technology with some SPF. That you could see that he actually was some Friedman, that he promised basically universal income, basic income, all of that. But it was just basically a show. It wasn't really about adventure. It wasn't about fantasizing about something bigger. It was just again selling the dream in a different kind of bottle, just changing the label basically. So effective altruism, I think, is a great example of this level of personal engagement that is not leading to liberation of self and transcendence.
Thank you.
Maybe a remark about subjectivity. I think that the way you define subjectivity is a little bit what I have called agency. The fact that the world consists not out of inert objects, but agents, and agents are things that act in the world and that sense the world from their own point of view. By definition, they only know what they sense, so they are subjective, and they are agent. That means that they have certain desires, they want to achieve certain things, and they will act to achieve their desires while being moved by what they sense. So it's this constant feedback between sensation, action, achievement that I see as an agent. And of course, people are agent, but animals are agent, plants are agent, bacteria are agent, and even atoms and molecules in some respect can be seen as agents.
Sure. Yeah, nothing to say about it. I agree.
Yeah, okay. If there are no more questions, I suggest maybe then we close here. We have had 2 hours of discussion. No more questions? Okay, then I thank everybody, and I hope that it has been recorded so that people can check it later. Okay, thank you, Raphaël.
Thank you.
Thanks to you. Thank you for the invitation.